top 5 all-time AI fails so far, right? This isn't an official list. This isn't read directly. I didn't ask ChatGPT for a list of the top 5 fails. This is a list I sort of compiled from a bunch of sources. Top 5 all-time AI fails so far, because there will be more. Number 5, and they're sort of in a particular order, maybe not a super particular order. Number 5, McDonald's drive-through experiment. McDonald's tried to make AI tools available so that people could order using AI instead of human employees through their drive-through. But what happened is people repeatedly were getting chicken nuggets, even though they didn't want chicken nuggets, and it kept adding more and more chicken nuggets to people's orders. So eventually McDonald's just pulled the plug on its drive-through experiment. Not too much harm, just too many chicken nuggets. Number 4, an AI tool falsely accused NBA superstar Klay Thompson, multiple championships with the Golden State Warriors, one of the Splash Brothers, claimed that he went on a crime spree and that he was throwing bricks. It's possible that it interpreted bricks in a literal sense and not an NBA, if you throw the ball and it bounces off the rim, it's a brick kind of idea. But still, the AI got it wrong and accused him of throwing bricks, like literally bricks. Okay, number 3, getting a little more serious here. A New York City chatbot used to give people information, and like entrepreneurs and small business owners, information about how they could navigate different problems. And the chatbot told the business owners that if an employee claims they're being harassed by another employee or by a supervisor, that they should just be fired. This is bad advice. This is illegal advice, right? So that would be a fail on the chatbot's part. Number 2 and number 1 are bigger ones. Number 2 hits home because it's about Sports Illustrated. I'm a journalism professor. I'm an associate professor of journalism at the Missouri School of Journalism. And while I'm at it, also a AI teaching fellow at the University of Missouri Teaching for Learning Center, which is why I'm hosting this podcast in exploring AI critical literacy. Number 2, about Sports Illustrated, the magazine I read from cover to cover. It's probably the only magazine I read when I was like 10, all the way until I was 30. I read cover to cover every week. Love the great writing, great journalism. But recently in 2023, Sports Illustrated was found out to have been using AI to write multiple reports, not telling the audience anything about that, and also misleading the audience into believing that the reports were written by human authors by creating fake names and avatars of the reporters. Okay, a little bit of an AI fail there. And then the last one is, there's a lot of candidates for number 1, but the next one on the list is the great failed Microsoft Tay experiment. This is probably the most famous AI fail so far, right? Microsoft in 2016 released Tay, which was a chatbot on Twitter that was meant to learn about human interaction through actually engaging with humans on Twitter. The problem was it did learn about human interaction and became a racist hate bot that was just spewing hate and false information. And so Microsoft ultimately just pulled the plug. After 16 hours, it didn't even make it a day. After 16 hours, the Tay bot had posted 95,000 tweets that became increasingly hateful and problematic and false. So Microsoft pulled the plug on Tay. So top 5, according to, this is a debate, as all top 10, top 5, all top lists are a debatable list, I'm sure. But the point is, AI is not very old, but we've already had a lot of really big reasons to be skeptical or doubtful of it. But as we think about AI critical literacy here in episode 5 of the AI Critical Literacy podcast, and we start exploring Ethan Mollick's co-intelligence, the later chapters in his book, which today's chapters are about AI as a coworker and AI as a tutor, we should be thinking critically, not on a yes or no scale. Maybe it's one of the really helpful things about today's episode is thinking about, we don't have to say we absolutely never want to use AI or we absolutely must use AI, but what if we think about it in a more nuanced way? What if we think of it in the sense that it's good for some things and not for others? And that maybe, my hope is that today's episode will give people the type of information they need to make decisions about how they want to use it for themselves in a teaching sense and how they want to use it with their students in a learning sense. How they want to approach it so that we don't create AI fails in the classroom. AI fails because we as an instructor might not tell our students clearly enough what the expectations are for AI use in assignments or in the class overall. AI fails by students if they use AI to produce an entire written assignment where they didn't actually do the assignment, they just had AI do it. AI fails by us, again, as instructors, in the sense that we don't help prepare our students to be citizens or even employees in their professions or in their fields, because we didn't help them gain any kind of nuanced understanding of the appropriate and not appropriate uses of the tools or how to use the tools. There's a lot of fails that can happen. But hopefully today's episode, and I mean, we had just a wonderful conversation with Flower Darby, the Associate Director of the Teaching for Learning Center here at the University of Missouri, and someone who's spent so much time thinking about AI and thinking about teaching and thinking about learning, and also thinking about how we can reach every student in our classroom. And I really appreciated that part of our discussion today, how AI, or just in general, like thinking about how we're going to reach and make accessible our classrooms to every type of student. So what follows is, I hope, an extremely beneficial conversation between Flower and I. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Here is our conversation. Would you begin by introducing yourself and your title, and then tell us what your first experience with AI was?
Sure. I'm Flower Darby. I'm one of the associate directors here at the Teaching for Learning Center at the University of Missouri-Columbia. And my first experience with AI was keeping my head in the sand for a solid 6 or 8 months, where I refused to figure out how to deal with it. But the most memorable initial experience that I had was finally, I decided I have to start learning how to use this. I decided I would just not Google, anything that I would normally have Googled, I would just ask AI. And I did pick Google Bard, as it was called then. And the most memorable initial interaction was when I asked it, what does the acronym FGWC stand for when it comes to teaching strategies for students, FGWC students. And without skipping a beat, Google Bard came back and said, fighters for windmills and garden centers. These people are doing great work and they need our support. And that was my first clue that we couldn't trust these tools. So yeah.
Are you saying there's no such thing as fighters for gardens and windmill?
I did not investigate further. However, I did go to old-fashioned Google and learn that the acronym stands for first generation of working class students. But that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, it's a little more contextual. Let them fight for their windmills, but I think we were probably thinking more about the first generation students. That's a lesson in itself. And would you say it's 2023 maybe that you did that?
Yeah, that was about June of 23.
But in AI time, that was 20 years ago, probably. It was like 2 years ago, not even 2 years.
Or like 100 years ago.
Yeah, so much has changed in so short a time. Like, I miss the days when we had the VCR and we were like, this is just amazing. We have a VCR. Like, this is just revolutionary. And then we got a DVD player and we're like, well, that's a big upgrade. But it was like it was at least 10 years later. But now
Right.
It's monthly, the game changes. That's really interesting. I think mine was, I think I've said in other episodes, was Eliza, fiddling around with Eliza, which I don't even know. It depends on how you define AI. People would say Eliza's not AI, that she's just a bot.
That's remind me, honestly.
Eliza's a therapy bot that was created in the 60s. So I think MIT.
That's right.
I think she's generally considered the first AI or the first bot.
Okay.
You could still engage with it.
That's right. Thank you. I guess I was reading into your question post November 2022 is where I went, but yeah.
A little ahead of 2022 or a little before it. So we had 2 chapters here, and I think the reason I really wanted to speak with you was the second chapter, the AI as a tutor chapter, but the AI as a coworker chapter, it's a lot. Like there's things in here that matter. And so I wanted to see what you thought about some of them. I think the initial part of the chapter talked about whether, if I'm going to boil it down, is basically our faculty and instructors on this campus, like training themselves out of jobs by using AI in their classroom. If we slowly start developing, what did you take from that part of the chapter?
Malik argues that is not what we are doing, and I do find his argument persuasive. I look at AI, broadly speaking, as a tool to solve a problem. I know I'm not the first person to say it's a tool, but I do think in education specifically, we need to think about what are the problems that we need to solve and where might AI be useful. I will tip my hand and say that I 100% believe that students will always need our full humanity, specifically in the form of our wisdom, our experience, and our empathy. I do not believe that a bot will ever replace those elements of what we bring to the teaching and learning equation. However, I would argue that AI can be used to solve problems, and then we need to dig below the surface and really get to the root cause of some of those problems in order to wield that tool effectively.
Yeah, that really makes sense. He listed a few reasons why they're different than yours, though. I liked yours better, actually. He listed a few reasons why AI might not be replacing us in the classroom. And he put things like credibility, receptibility, like how willing students would be to receive purely AI instruction, or their willingness to engage with AI tools as a learning tool, like not in the sense that, hey, this wrote my essay, but as a teaching tool, as a lecturer almost. But I don't know. Those feel like they're reliant. Credibility, receptibility, willingness to engage, or might be reliant on a time period. Like those might have an expiration date. Whereas I guess empathy never has an expiration date, I hope, like sort of thing.
You could argue against my point that these tools are going to be programmed to demonstrate empathy, but this is my key argument here. First of all, disclaimer, anything we're talking about today could all be irrelevant in 6 months, right? We know that. However, I choose to believe, and it is a deliberate and empowered choice, I choose to believe that it is our experience and our wisdom and that compassion that no AI tool is ever going to be able to replicate. And just to illustrate very briefly, I was at a Teaching with AI conference last summer. In a session that I found very impactful, I connected with a person sitting next to me, and all of a sudden we were engaging at a really deep level about our autistic teenagers who are dealing with mental health problems. And I literally came to tears in talking with this other mom who was walking a very similar path that I was walking. And I just don't think that AI is ever going to do that. And I think when our students perceive in us that we have experience that is uniquely human, when we have wisdom that derives from our hard-won experience, and when we bring that with the psychological depth of genuine caring about them, there's no bot that's going to replace us in the classroom.
But that would require that faculty and instructors on campus actually do have empathy. And think that we've all had the faculty, like I hope I'm not one of them, I really hope, but we've all had faculty or teachers in our lives who did not engage with us. They were checking the box, they were doing the job, they were leaving. So I guess some faculty could actually bot themselves, basically. I think that's
those ones will be replaced.
My teenagers' sons would say they're just botting themselves, like they're just basically acting like AI. That's interesting. So the faculty that don't really engage with the students in a human level face a greater level of replacement, a greater risk of replacement than those who are empathetic and engage on a human level with. I like that. It's really interesting. I'm so glad we're doing. I did not initially get that from reading the chapter, but from talking about it, which is human interaction. And we're getting it. Ask ChatGPT, what does Malik's chapter about AI as a coworker say? It would not have brought this thought with it. There's a couple interesting dichotomies that he brings in. He doesn't frame them as dichotomies, but I felt like I'm always interested when people make it something or other. It's easy to learn that way, but it's also a lot has to be left out of the equation when you put things in one bucket or the other. And the first one was this jagged frontier concept, which I've, as you probably already know, really latched onto. It made a lot of sense to me the first time I heard it. It really helps me explain to other people. It helps us avoid the dichotomy, actually, because a lot of people are just like no to AI, or the opposite is they're running into the building and not even thinking about whether or not it's going to fall down on them. The jagged frontier is a more nuanced way to understand it. But I almost felt like he was saying, I guess the dichotomy becomes there are good uses for AI and there are bad uses for AI. I want to ask you what you think about the jagged frontier metaphor or imagery. Is it an accurate way to describe how we could understand AI and its possibilities for us?
Yeah, I agree that the unpredictability especially is what I latch onto. I know that this analogy or illustration has really resonated with you, and I'm intrigued by that because I'm not sure it has taken that deep hold of me. And I can't quite articulate what it is that I think would be different. However, this particular concept sums up the idea that it's very hard to know what AI is going to do well and what it isn't. And not only from tool to tool and on a day-to-day basis, since the output changes on a day-to-day basis, but also I've thought deeply about our individual uses of it, right? So ways that AI is going to help you, that's going to be different than how AI helps me based on our areas of weakness, our time pressures, and quite frankly, I've come to conclude our own moral compass. Like something that seems appropriate to me to use, you might be shocked and horrified, say, I can't believe she's doing that. So the individuality, the unpredictability, the ever-changing nature of it, I'm not sure that for me, the Jagged Frontier exactly encapsulates that, but certainly it is more nuanced than all AI or no AI.
So I've never thought the way you put it as it's like the jagged frontier is on an individual level almost. Like
Yeah.
where I've thought about it as like a macro level, I've thought about there's some things like we should know on an AI literacy level. There's some things we should know that AI is a good tool for, and some things we should know it's not a good tool for. So in some ways, it's really out there, like a jagged point, very innovative and helpful for us. In some ways, it should be left alone because it's bad at it. But it's really interesting that you put it on an individual level, that each of us, it could vary. The jaggedness of the frontier could vary based on who we are and what we want to use it for. It's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a conversation at yet another conference because this is all I do these days. And one of the attendees came up to me and said, that other presenter was saying that she writes her blog with AI. AI writes her blog. Isn't that terrible? I can't believe she's doing that. And it really highlighted for me that, well, for that, I actually think that is the future of work. I think she's being efficient. But for you personally, the person who was talking to me, that's offensive. That goes against your teaching of writing values. She was an English teacher. So that's where I really feel like the individuality, again, the strengths, what do I bring to the equation? Where do I know I need help? How do I gauge in the moment what seems an appropriate way to use AI? I honestly think a lot of that is directly tied into critical AI literacy. I think it's currently a very individual equation that we need to navigate.
So it's individual, it's AI literacy on a one-to-one, because I keep thinking about it for the whole university or for an institution or for a classroom or an instructor. But it's interesting you're saying, think about AI literacy on an individual level, which means your literacy could be different from person to person. Of course, it's going to be different, but your outcome literacy, what you find when you study it, would vary from individual. That's interesting. Maybe that's why none of us can really get our minds around AI, right?
It varies.
Show me somebody who thinks they own it all. And I'm like, it means you don't understand the question.
To your point of needing to think about broadly curricular change that needs to happen, the kinds of things we've been talking about already, this is exactly what I would be writing into an AI literacy curriculum if I were writing one, which I am not. But helping students learn what the tools are good at and bad at, generally speaking, but also for them specifically, helping them learn that you can't trust it, that it's going to provide inaccurate information. I think I heard you say the other day, talking about one of your sons who just takes the answer that ChatGPT provides and just runs with it. Okay, that's the answer then. Helping our students look for the nuance, fact check for sure, cross check information like I did when I went to Google for FGWC. It's, again, my example is a simple one, but I bring it on purpose, like helps us conceive, right? So for me, AI critical literacy is helping individuals figure out how they can use the tools effectively for themselves and ethically based on their own judgment in the moment.
And that's perfect. So I'm so glad we're thinking of it these different ways.
Yeah.
He goes on to talk about, and I put it in my notes, he doesn't spend very much time on AI and copyright. Like a whole book. He also doesn't spend enough time on training. But I haven't finished, there's a couple more chapters we haven't gone through yet. But most of the books so far, these are like two of the most literary, I guess copyright may not be it is a literacy issue. Because when we think about how we're going to use AI, we should be thinking about, can I own the work? I don't know. I guess we don't always think about it that way. But he spends a very short amount of time on it. But basically, it's healthy to know that at this point, anything anybody creates with AI, they don't own the copyright for it. So
I think that's right.
Anybody could take their work and use it without permission. So I just thought that's worth noting in there.
Have you heard of the concept of the post-plagiarism era that we're in?
I guess I'm going to say no.
Sure. Sarah Elaine Eaton has been writing about this. It's just the idea, because to me, the two are very closely linked in my mind, copyright and intellectual property, and then plagiarism or unauthorized use. I really think that things like copyright are fading in significance or may no longer be relevant at some point.
I think the corporations would disagree with you so much, but
good. Love it.
So Lawrence Lessig has been arguing what you argued basically since the internet came out, that the old copyright laws are keeping us from being creative, that The copyright law is basically during the physical media era, we're a read-only culture that we got trained, and the copyright holders trained us in this way that we could only engage with their material. We could never like exchange ideas with their material. But with the internet, with YouTube and things like that, it became a read-write culture. But the law has never been updated, and the case precedents have never been updated to account for the fact that we're living in a read-write culture, a culture, which is interesting because he used read-only and read-write, which are old disc terms, which my students have no knowledge of the read-write versus read-only content. Be the VHS tapes that you had to break the little tab in order to record on, or and then tape over it. But anyway, so it made me think of that. So it's difficult to think that, but for now, I guess what we really need to know is for now, the AI content that's produced is not copyrightable, which is interesting. So if I'm under contract to write a book, if I produced an entire book with AI, there'd be a lot of problems. But one of them would be, one of the ones that's down the list, 6 or 7 steps, would be that no one would own the copyright to that.
Yeah. Honestly, I haven't thought as much about this particular facet.
It's the nerd. It's my nerd area. We all get to have some. Another dichotomy he brought up was automated versus assisted. And I've been thinking about that too, of separating AI. When we think about AI literacy, separating the tasks of AI from automated, which means we're not like, no human is involved. I just set it. I set the speed, I wind the clock, and I let the clock run. Versus assisted, where we're engaging with it, it's helping us. Should we think of this is this a helpful dichotomy for teaching and learning?
Yes, because our students are people too, and they are navigating the same society that we are, and they're looking at their future with varying degrees of concern, alarm, grief, excitement, enthusiasm, dreams, right? So when I think about teaching and learning, I pretty quickly moved just to sort of society as a whole. I think it's useful for everybody to give some thought to, am I going to put myself into a Waymo, a self-driving car, and give up all control altogether? Or am I going to choose to retain some control of the driving experience and use the tools that can help me in that moment without giving up all of my control and agency? I do think that's a helpful way to get people thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't he also talk about taking the hands off the wheel, like that, to that idea of we need to remain engaged with these tools. We can't just let them do their thing without us keeping our hands on the wheel and keeping alert and actively engaged behind the steering wheel.
Yeah. The assist version of his end of his dichotomy is basically the human in the loop model, I think, saying
Right.
I think it's healthy in our minds to think, okay, like we could have come into this discussion without the help of this, but the idea of there's an automated bucket and an assisted bucket helps me to understand it, because I'm like, okay, I don't want to automate because that means I'm not engaged.
Right.
I don't want my students, I don't think there's a lot of instances where my students should be automating. I want to teach them to work on the assist side of it, to engage with people as a human. And I think a lot of people, when they haven't engaged with AI a lot, are like, oh yeah, it's all automation. Or just, I'm going to say, AI, write this paper for me, and then you copy and paste and you turn it in. That would be a very bad version of automation for the educational. Whereas the assisted version is an engagement between the human and the tool. So it's just helpful to me to separate things like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is a helpful set of parameters to use to help us think through. And again, I think students, individuals, we all need to be thinking through every given task or even any piece of information that we encounter that isn't in real life, and try to develop that kind of critical literacy as well. But just about the phrase, the human in the loop, I heard an AI researcher talking about really that phrase should be the AI in the loop. Like, we're still in control. I know human in the loop is broadly used, but it was an interesting, different perspective. Let's retain control, right? We're not just part of the mechanism. We still have the ultimate agency here.
Well, that's really good.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. It's worth thinking about, because it puts the emphasis on the human being in charge still. The AI is the tool. Yeah. Yeah. I just following up on that thought, thinking about how many the differences between automation and assistance when it comes to teaching and learning. Like, we really have two parties here. We have the students, And then we have the teachers, we have the us who are trying to convey
Mhm.
messages, and we could use AI to help us. And then we have the students who are engaging with the course material and trying to decide how to complete the assignments in the course material. What are other examples of automation versus assistance? I'm wondering if there's anything else.
Well, I feel like students know, and I don't just feel like it. I've talked with students, and they tell me that they know that they need to get the foundational knowledge. They know they need to get the industry knowledge. They are facing job interviews after graduation, and they know they have to be able to speak knowledgeably and compellingly in an interview, right? In that moment, they can't be relying on AI. So they know the information has to be in their minds. Now, what they're also telling me is that in a moment of weakness or when there are competing priorities, yeah, it's going to be tempted to lean more or heavily toward automation. So as we begin to talk in a few minutes, maybe about AI as a teacher or a tutor, I have some ideas there too. But I think if nothing else right now in this moment, we're not talking to students enough about how much to automate, how much to assist, if you're putting your own words into the tool and then getting its output and then refining it further, it is that co-intelligence that Malik is talking about. That is an expertise. He argues later in the book, spoiler alert, that we need to develop is that AI expertise, how to use it well to do what we need it to do. So I think the automation and assistance model or language is really helpful for students to help them maybe resist that temptation in the moment to automate too much and to use it more as a tool or to think with tool.
I was thinking how this could be helpful in syllabus language. I'm wondering if this wasn't planned. I'm just thinking as you're with your ideas that when we're trying to think of how to communicate to our students what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in a class or on a specific assignment, if framing it in you cannot automate the task, of course you can't, I guess that wording wouldn't work. But in your mind, I guess, as you try to write the guidance to the students, saying assistance, you can use it to assist you, which means you have to be engaged at this level. I wonder if that,
Right.
I think we're all struggling. I don't really want to copy and paste a pre-written syllabus language. I want to write it for my classes. I don't have anything against them. I think actually I've drafted some of those, but I don't have anything against it. But I think for my classes, they deserve specific guidance based on my content. So anyway, I was just thinking that could be useful.
But look at what you just said there. You're modeling for yourself using your own agency and your understanding of your context about how you don't want to offload or outsource the generation of a syllabus statement in this particular case. Like you know that you're bringing your expertise, your experience, your authentic care for your students and what they're learning, what they're going to get out of your class. And you're saying, I'm going to choose not to outsource this statement and just choose a copy paste one, right? Back to your point though, I'm just taking a meta moment to say, look, you're doing it right here. But back to your point, I think any language that we can use with our students, not only in a syllabus statement, but even on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, that can help them resist that temptation. And again, I can say more when we get to the real specific class-related stuff. But yeah, if automate and assist makes sense to you, give them that. I was talking with a professor recently where I said, it is so easy to generate a lit review, an outline for a lit review, and really provide all the sources using AI. And they're like, no, you should just be using it as a tool to help you. And I said, why don't I just go to Consensus and type in my topic and ask for a lit review? And they said, don't generate the outline with the tool. You generate your own outline and then get feedback from it. And that degree of clarity, they really had to hammer it in. That's what I think our students need right now. So all the analogies, all the automate versus assist, all the outsourcing of your knowledge versus doing the work with the tool, you're still developing your own knowledge and skills and abilities. We need all the language and all the clarity that we can get.
But I would argue the faculty or the instructor needs to understand the AI enough to write that statement. So that's just one thing I wanted to add, that in order to write a syllabus statement or assignment guidelines or expectations for a class that are good or useful to our students, we have to understand the tool well enough to write it, which means we probably have to experience or engage with the tool to some extent.
Oh, 100%. We can't teach anything or provide guidance on anything that we don't know. Have you ever had to teach a class that was outside your of expertise? It's pretty painful. So we have to know how these tools work, even if we then choose to say, but we're not going to use these tools in this class for these reasons. We have to gain the experience and knowledge ourselves. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to get out there on the jagged frontier and be playing with them.
Malik talked about how, because I think this is something you specifically can really speak about above everything else, of course. And that Malik, he's talked about how AI is probably the most effective at helping people who need the most help. He talked about like the worker in your organization who is the weakest at the tasks that they're assigned will be most helped by AI. And I was thinking this in the classroom would mean that our students who are going to struggle the most or have the least educational background or support are most likely to be helped. So, what did you think when you read that passage or that area?
Yeah. And I remember one of his specific examples was like a customer service agent at a phone company. If I'm the customer who's interacting with that person and I'm getting frustrated because they're not really helping me, I would love for that employee to have the AI to make them more effective at their job from my perspective as a customer. When it comes to students, we know, and you alluded to this just now, we know that they are coming to us with varied levels of preparation, support, college knowledge. Maybe they are in fact first generation. These tools can 100% help bridge the gaps that other students don't have. And so, again, it really is about helping students figure out appropriate, responsible ways to use these tools. And telling them they can't use the tool at all isn't working, right? We know they're going to use them. But thinking about it, and this does tip our hand a little bit towards some of our upcoming conversation maybe, but thinking about it as an equity-minded tool, helping students figure out what they need, helping them navigate how to approach their advising appointment or how to deal with their financial aid situation. These tools can be really great at extracurricular issues that students need to navigate too. Yeah, why not help the students who come to us maybe with a little less preparation?
Yeah, there are a lot of hidden things in college. Like,
something as simple as syllabus. There's
yeah,
research that shows that first gen students do not know what the word syllabus means, and we don't even stop to think about that. And yeah, so why not have but no, honestly, it's students are doing this anyway, right? They're asking the tools, I need a little help navigating this or understanding that. So great. To me, that's a win.
So we've been alluding to it for a while. The second chapter was AI as a tutor, and this is just so fascinating. It's actually maybe one of the chapters of the book that's most specific to teaching and learning on this campus. And the first thing that came to mind, and I can't remember if it's a specific wording in the chapter, was this idea of cheating. I was really happy about the AI task force last year because we didn't play the gotcha game with the things that we were trying to write. I think a lot of people, the first thing they say is students are cheating using AI. And so I wanted to see what you thought about. I know Moloch brings up the idea that students are using it in the classroom, but what you thought about how we should be navigating this idea of AI and cheating.
I've learned a lot from Trisha Bertrand-Gallant and David Redinger, and I have their brand new book in my hand right now. It's called The Opposite of Cheating, Teaching for Integrity in the Age of AI. First of all, they and we have to acknowledge that, yes, students are cheating with AI. And yes, AI is making it much, much easier than it ever was before. But they really form a very strong argument that takes the morality out of this topic. And it's more about the fact that all people will cheat when they are up against it, when circumstances cause them to choose to take a shortcut. And it's not that they themselves are villains or criminals. It is that all of us will take shortcuts when stakes are high, when whatever it might be. And another analogy that I heard from somebody else takes us back to Napster. This was a law professor on a panel. And I think maybe you're old enough to know, maybe some of our listeners are not old enough to know that Napster was a music piracy software, and it made it very possible to take a whole bunch of music from the internet without paying for it. When Napster was big, and it was really only about a couple of years there, at that time, you probably don't know this about me, but I was a dance teacher, and dance teachers don't make a lot of money. And I took a ton of music. I took a lot unpaid for. Do you judge me? There was the opportunity. It was possible. Would I do that today? I don't know. But the opportunity was there and I took it. And I definitely think that's what's happening with our students to some extent right now. I do think that this is an unusual moment. We're not going to be here forever, that guardrails will be put in place. In this particular example, lots of lawsuits, regulations, and in fact, the whole music industry changed as a result, right? Yes. Which I don't want to go too far with that part of the analogy because I don't really think that higher ed is fully going to change. But students who, yes, it's possible to cheat. It was possible to cheat before AI. We know that. It makes it easier. I am going to argue as we continue this conversation that students can and will choose not to cheat, not to shortchange their own learning. And there are lots of things we can do to help them make that choice.
Yeah, I had 2 students come in my office this afternoon and tell me that they don't want to have a problem on my test that's upcoming. And so they wanted to talk with me ahead of time about something that was like an accessibility issue they were having. I was like, thank you so much for just coming up front and not trying to sneak around. Because I was like, if you had a problem with what you were saying and it happened afterwards, it'd be harder for us to have this conversation. But beforehand, it's professional. And we do have
Right.
there are honest students who are, but like you said, that I don't, as someone who's like making these decisions like daily for my classes, I don't always blame them when they take the short cut. I don't know. I feel like it's partially my fault. At least I feel like I'm responsible in creating a class that's legitimate. Like, so
Mhm.
I'm responsible for making adjustments for basically their behavior, I guess, to some extent. And
Right.
so I definitely appreciated last spring when we were talking about on the task force that the whole gotcha game, I don't think is very productive, right? I think we need to adjust our classrooms, adjust our work, adjust our expectations. I'm thinking about transitioning some assignments to explicitly saying you can assist with AI here. Like I have an
Yeah.
assignment where I have them read an entire terms of service for at least one service that they use so they can actually read it for once in their lives. And I was
Right.
wondering what would be the teaching, what would be the learning difference, like the get out of this difference. If I said you are welcome to summarize this document using I wonder if they would, if they prompted it, if that would be the same amount of learning.
Yeah, I love it. It again, something that Bertram Gallant talks about is just having students read in different ways. And she was specifically referring to that more kind of interactive way. So if you feed this document, we're not just going out there on the web, ChatGPT, you're gonna look at this document and I'm gonna ask you questions and you're gonna provide me answers. It's more of a conversation. It's now the other way to do that though, I'm gonna offer a different perspective. I do 100% believe, based on my own experiences, that there comes time that just reading the direct text is the best approach, right? Sometimes I'm chatting with a scholarly paper and then I just need to get it out and literally print it and get my old school pencil in hand. Here it is, and wrestle with the words on the page. So I do think that is still a skill that students will need. And in this particular example, maybe in the terms of service that they choose, maybe they would annotate it and just to document their comments, their questions that, oh, I didn't know that was in there, right? So annotated reading, I think, has a lot of potential, but the way we read and gain information absolutely is changing. And we should change our assignments. And I just want to say one more thing. Yes, we should be changing our assignments just like that. However, I do want to acknowledge the amount of time and labor and energy and, quite frankly, the emotional toll that takes. If we had a prized assignment and we loved it for so many years and we have to change it, you were saying we have to adjust this and adjust that. And I do agree, but I also want to voice that takes a lot of time and energy, and that can be hard to do in the work conditions that we work in.
Yeah, this assignment I'm talking about, so an award-winning assignment. There comes a time that these things have to be put to rest and or updated. We'll see. So he's talking about AI as a tutor. He talks about teaching writing, and I think that's very important for our conversation for AI literacy is to the extent that we should be teaching our students about writing and assisted writing. And that's a really one of the most sensitive topics probably on campus. I don't know what my question is at the end of that. Just what do you think about? I feel like Chris Farley on that SNL skit where he's
That was
interviewing people.
cool, right?
Do you remember that? But what do you?
Well,
Go ahead.
I have read The Opposite of Cheating. I'm looking off camera. I have not yet read this book. It is from a writing expert, John Warner. It's called More Than Words: How to Think About Writing in the Age of AI. And I believe, I haven't even listened to a podcast yet about this, but I believe he is arguing that there is more than mechanics when it comes to writing. We do express our humanity. We certainly, I'm sure you would agree, we certainly figure out what we think about a thing when we write it. I literally cannot think anymore without either typing or handwriting. I just can't think. So he's making that kind of an argument. And I know that composition instructors and probably journalism instructors and others are doing everything that they can to have students write for themselves. Now, to me, it's a persuasion piece. We have to convince them of the value of doing this. I think students are also figuring that out for themselves. But just on the topic of teaching writing, I know it's challenging. I know there are thousands of instructors all across the country and the world, I'm sure, who are wrestling with it. But for me, it's about what is the value of the writing. I have found in my own experience, if I really care about a project, I do not go to AI for it. I want my voice, my thoughts uninhibited. But when it's something that I don't care that much about, sure, AI, help me out. That's the kind of thing we can teach students too, or help them discover for themselves, I would say, is probably more accurate.
And these are all literacy issues in the sense that I'm hoping that people who teach on this campus and people who are learning on this campus can have this discussion. The faculty can have this discussion with their students.
Yeah.
They have to have the literacy, and that students can have this discussion with themselves or each other, whether or not how they want to engage with the AI tools based on knowing enough to make an informed decision about it. He also talks about flipping the classroom, and he's basically saying the lecture is going away because of AI. I would assume that you would agree that the lecture was already losing its strength.
Certainly, I would argue against the lecture in the traditional format that has existed for literal hundreds of years, where it's one person standing in front of a classroom. But I'm not sure I'm ready to give up on the idea of the lecture in terms of that flipped class format. And just to make sure listeners know, we're talking about where you provide recorded lectures, usually oftentimes shorter than a class period. Students watch that in Canvas as an example prior to coming to class. And then rather than us talking to the students, we're asking them to do things, solve problems, answer questions, that kind of thing. So I do think there is a place for the lecture, because I'm going to come back to the whole sort of expertise, experience, wisdom. Educator who really cares about their material and their students will find ways of explaining it that are relevant. And I don't think we're going to lose that. And I don't think we should lose that.
I was reading this on a plane, and I closed the book. I read this part. I thought, okay, I'm going to blow up my class just for fun, right? I'm stuck on the plane, nothing else to do. And as I closed the book, I was like, this is it. This is the time. You're stuck on the plane. I'm going to blow up my class, my twice a week, 75-minute class period. So I have 150 weeks. I'm going to think all the way outside the box. What if we are not even, how do I do this? And here's what I ran into. I have 200 students. I just could not figure out how to break them into small enough sections to have meaningful flipped classroom conversations with them. And I guess I was just thinking that my approach to teaching depends on the size of the room, right? If I have 20 or fewer students, I am obligated. It is my job as a teacher to engage with them on a individual, like we're working together to solve a problem level. But there's a point where the class becomes so big that we can't do that. Like the 2 students who stopped my office today, I didn't know they were in my class. I've never met them. They're just lovely young people who are among the 2 people I don't know in my class. So I guess there might be, what would you say? I don't know how many faculty on campus teach large lectures. How do you do what he's saying and leverage AI? Because I really wanted to, I wanted to give it a try, at least hypothetically on a plane. What do you say to someone who's, I want to try the AI. I want to try to leverage AI in my classroom, but my class is just too big. I don't know how to make this happen. Is this the jagged frontier?
Again, the sort of, where is it useful? You're using your disciplinary expertise, your educator wisdom to figure out where it makes sense to use the tool. 100% jagged frontier. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I am compelled to say it's the untenable labor conditions that we work in that significantly limit what we can do. And during the pandemic, I said to people, COVID-19 has laid bare the existing structural and systemic problems in higher education, just like that medical dye that we inject into a patient's veins. AI is doing the same thing, right? These are problems. I don't see them changing, because think about COVID-19. We came right back to the broken ways of doing things, and we still do them. Large enrollment classes is chief among the concerns that I have in this area. So let us be kind to ourselves and say, okay, I am constrained by the conditions in which I work. Here's where I can use the tool. Here's where I can't. Now, probably a topic for another day. We could absolutely talk in more depth about, even in a large lecture format, even an asynchronous online format, how are we going to use AI? How are we going to leverage it? How are we going to help students learn to use it? I do believe that we can and should. But really what I thought of on this topic, large enrollment, use of AI, what I really thought of is it's very difficult to have the one-to-one conversation with students if we do suspect that they're leaning too much on AI. They are too far toward automation. The general advice right now among the scholars and experts is that you should use it as a teachable moment. Talk to the student. What did you do? How did that go? What did you learn? Why did you make that choice? And sometimes still report them to academic integrity, but use it as a teachable moment. However, that's really hard to do with 200 students. So we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we all just have to adapt the best we can. Related to this, I'm not jumping to a whole new thing. He said this quote, students are already using AI as a learning tool. Teachers are already using AI to prep for class. The change is already here. It seems like a very inevitablist. Is that even a word? I
love it.
The change has happened. It's inevitable. Resistance is futile. Do you think, I guess it is clear, students are already using this tool. I guess teachers are already using AI. I don't know to what extent here on campus faculty are using AI. I certainly do not use AI to prep for class. I've never used it. I will use it to help me write a test. So I don't know. You talk to faculty from all over campus. Are faculty using AI to prep for class?
Not as much as I think they should, or as much as I think they will. The adoption curve is slow. I don't even know if that's the right phrase, but the rate of adoption is very slow. 5 years from now, everybody's going to be using it for class prep and it's already getting embedded in textbooks, right? To give students feedback in the moment, to coach them in the moment. I would agree with Malik. The change is already here. So there's a pretty raging debate going on regarding the inevitability of AI, the level to which we can avoid it. And I honestly don't remember the nuances of that conversation. People will argue it's inevitable but avoidable, or it's unavoidable but, right, they get themselves tangled up in that conversation. And the gist of it is, AI is in everything we do. It's very difficult to avoid it entirely. I think we've had that conversation before. And students need these skills. They need these skills for their jobs to be competitive. So I believe that we should be using the tools to enhance our teaching and create more engaging experiences for our students. And I believe that we should help our students learn how to wield these tools wisely.
Yeah. I guess this podcast isn't to tell people what to do, right? It's a podcast to help them think about what to do. And so I hope that this is useful to that extent, right? It's up to individuals to the extent they want to use or not use this, but it should be helpful to have like more of the information available so you can make a more informed decision. So the last thing I wanted to check in with you about is your specific teaching expertise, or I'm not sure, learning and teaching expertise and how it relates with AI. You really emphasize reaching all students. And if I'm hopefully from reading some of the things you've written, that is accurate.
Yeah, 100%.
How does AI connect with your great concern for reaching all students?
It's a power tool. And like any power tools, when used appropriately and effectively, it's going to be powerful in positive and productive ways. When misused, it could create a lot of harm and damage. So we do need to be careful with it. People are already using these tools to, as we talked about before, bridge gaps in their preparation for our classes, to help them wrestle with difficult concepts. To students with learning disabilities are benefiting greatly. Students for whom English is not their first language are finally able to express their ideas in ways that can be taken seriously. It is already the most powerful assistive technology that has ever been available, and it is making things possible for people with physical disabilities that were not possible. For example, Meta eyeglasses that have the cameras in them. There are volunteers on the other side that can see through the lens and are telling the person wearing the glasses, describing what's in front of them. There's tremendous potential here. Neurodivergent students are using these tools to help them learn. And let's just face it, anybody who's struggling with a class. So I've been thinking about this specifically with statistics. So my background is English literature. In my graduate studies, at some point further down the line, I decided to take statistics I should become a more critical consumer of the literature. I had no idea, no understanding whatsoever. If ChatGPT had been available, I would have had a much richer learning experience. I earned an A after beating my head against the statistics wall for an entire semester and pouring in huge amounts of time and energy. If ChatGPT had been there to coach me, I would have learned it more effectively. I got an A and I don't know anything about statistics.
So ways. I don't know how I got an A. I took that final exam. It's like I took it at a master's and doctoral level, and I still cannot. It just seems like I'm just doing magic. It's magic. So that would be a great tool if I could just be like, WTF as ANOVA. What are you doing? What is this? And yeah, it would have been really helpful. There's always a new semester coming. If someone's thinking about incorporating more AI into their class because they want to reach students that are traditionally going to struggle. I know there's students who are always going to struggle in my class. I don't know who they are is the problem until they start failing. But what are some ways that they can incorporate AI into their class to help level the playing field in some ways, like we were talking about?
So I have a few different answers here. Certainly, I do believe we're still in a moment that we need to be explicitly coaching students on what is an appropriate way to use AI for this class and what is not appropriate. And I said this class, but actually that can change from assignment to assignment. Maybe early in the semester, you can ask them to do less and then they get more And so here's a very specific tool that has been developed and is helping a lot of instructors with this very question. It is called the AI Assessment Scale, Artificial Intelligence Assessment Scale. No, it's not FIRS. Perkins is the lead author, collaborator. If you were to Google AI Assessment Scale, AIAS, you'll find it. It gets exactly away from that false dichotomy that we were talking about earlier, the all AI or no AI. And I've heard FIRS present on this, and he's really compelling. A lot of faculty are like, students are using AI, so it doesn't even matter. Why even try to figure out what they're learning first? Or the exact opposite. No AI, I'm going to police, I'm going to ban, I'm going to detect, I'm going to gotcha. What this does, it provides 5 levels of ranging from no AI to AI exploration, I think, is level 5. And I don't even know what you're going to do with AI. Surprise me. Go figure it out. Do something amazing with AI. And then there's 3 levels in between there, right? And what they recommend, and I'm seeing this helpful for a lot of faculty, is whether for the class or whether for individual tasks and assignments, be very transparent and say, look, I'm asking you to stay at level 2 for this particular assignment. Now, and then you talk with students, or maybe you have that discussion. Again, hard to do in 200 seat class, but maybe it's a clear question, even like in a discussion. What seems appropriate to you? And then back to that idea, if you have time, if it looks like a student leaned too heavily on the tools, the way they talk about it, then you can say, I asked you to stay at level 2. It seems to me that you went to level 4, which is like full AI. Again, level 5 is, I don't even know. But level 4, it seems like that's where you were at. So talk to me about your process. Combined with that tool, whether or not you use that specific approach or not, the other strategy that I'm seeing a lot of faculty use right now is just to embed a disclosure statement. It can be a citation, or it could be a literal 1 line at the bottom of a paper. ChatGPT was used to generate the outline, but I wrote the body of the essay. Or some faculty are doing like bubble comments, like this text I copied and pasted out of ChatGPT, but these other words are mine. Some kind of a disclosure. And what's happening is that students appreciate that. They want to know. Some faculty are saying, disclose the way you used AI and then reflect on it. And if you had any questions about whether that was appropriate. So these, I think, are really great ways to develop that literacy, to give students some guardrails. They're saying, like, we want that very clear guidance. We want to disclose. It gives us a comfort level. Okay, this is how I used it. I think key with both of those is not to really start with a punitive mindset. We're learning this together, and this is how I'm asking you to use it. And please tell me how you used it. We have to trust students. But I do want to say one more thing. I fully believe, I know for a fact, students are choosing not to use the tools when they know they need to know the information. So I was talking with a graduating senior in marketing and advertising. She is not a Mizzou student. She's in Texas. And she was telling me that when ChatGPT first came out a couple of years ago, she was using it as an underclassman, basically. She started to use it maybe a little bit too much. And this is what she literally said to me. She goes, I realized I'm getting stupid. And like... She knew that she was over relying on it and she was shooting herself in the foot. And now, as a graduating senior, what she told me actually is that I wish I had more guidance from my professors. I'm entering the job market. I don't feel 100% confident. I wish I felt more confident. So I've really thought a lot about her comment. They've been very illuminating.
We're doing this to make, there's levels, all right? We incorporate AI into our classes to make it more likely students learn, to make it more likely students who are likely to struggle are less likely to struggle. But we're also doing it because it's very likely when they graduate, they're going to have a job or even just be citizens in a world. Those are all pretty good reasons. We leave it out for the same reasons, right? We leave AI out for the same 3 reasons, right? They need to learn this by hand. They need to, I can't remember my list anymore. They need to learn this by hand without AI because their profession will require it. There's the same 3 reasons for including it as you would for excluding it.
And that's exactly the point. Students need to figure out when it is and is not appropriate. They need those skills. They will not be successful job candidates if they can't talk about how they're going to use AI to do the job. I believe we have an opportunity to help them develop that, but also, again, as citizens, as consumers of information, as people who are needing to develop, in my opinion, a lot more skepticism about everything we see here, read. I don't think we have a choice, but I made the mistake of saying that to a room full of journalism professors here at Mizzou a little while back. I think it might've been 2023. Didn't go over well. So I try not to use that phrase anymore. But maybe it's just that we have to acknowledge whether we're telling students, I'm asking you not to use AI and this is the reason. It's really important to emphasize the why, or here's how you are going to use AI. Either way, we can't pretend it's not happening. And I do believe a lot of faculty are still in that place. And I honestly, again, I'll blame the system because I don't think that higher ed is very good at giving people time and space to think through and wrestle and update. But either way, we have to acknowledge the elephant bot in the room and help our students figure out whether, when to use it, when not to use it. And they're figuring that out for themselves too. We can trust them.
And they're probably developing habits. So it would be really good, and especially early on in their university experience, to have these conversations early on. Because if once they develop the habit, I'm just going to AI my way through school, it might be harder to break the habit by the time they get to their upper level classes. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just thinking with
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. I think every single individual is going to figure out, and I'm fully convinced that some people will regret, right? I should not have chatted so much through college. That's what I'm hearing. That students are saying, I'm just going to chat that. Don't worry about it. So I should not have outsourced my learning so much because now I can't get a job. I really think that karma moment is going to come for people who are AIing their way through college. And that's a lesson. That's literacy development.
It's a tough one. Yeah, it's a lesson.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. We covered a lot, and I learned from talking to you. So that's really cool. I guess that's what we started with, the empathy and the humanness of it all. Like I said, if I had just tasked Google Gemini or something to tell me all about Malik's chapters on co-author and tutor, it would have given me the most boring, very probably accurate outline of what he said, but I wouldn't have probably riffed with it, learned from it, developed new ideas from it like we did. So it's like we're doing what we said while we're doing it. So cool. So thank you so much for your time. This has been such a cool talk.